Okay, so you were up here yesterday on a panel, and
What did I do?
but I want you to do another introduction of yourself. But this time, let's stretch it out a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got to where you're at today.
Okay. Well, the short version is I was in investment banking for a number of years, most of my career, and then about 10, 11 years ago, I met Bill Holmes and subsequently started working for him about that time. And then fast forward to last year, I became a free agent.
Wait, talk about your time
Yeah.
at Holmes
Sorry.
Motors.
Yeah. So I was learned the business. He was my mentor essentially. And 3 or 4 years in, I had a couple different promotions and promoted up to CEO about 5 years ago, I guess it was. So, and I ran the company for the last 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember meeting you when you were CFO, I think right before the transition to CEO. Does that sound about right?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
At a summit out here.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Or maybe I think it was here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so next. You decided to become a free agent.
Correct.
Because why?
Well, it was just time. It was a time for me and time for Bill too, I think. And so we just amicably parted ways back last year. And so it's been a heck of a few months since then, for sure.
Yeah, so that resulted in something. You took some steps, and
Yep.
That's the real thing that I want to talk about up here is you took something that was an idea and a conception that you brought to reality. What was it that you actually did?
Well, at the time, I had the options I had were either to go get a job at another dealership, or perhaps do my own dealership, start my own dealership, and that could have been either a greenfield startup or an acquisition. And I've got some experience in acquisitions from my previous career, so I was familiar with that process and what all was involved in that and the potential outcomes and so forth. So that was certainly, an avenue. And so at the time, of the 2 or 3 deals that I knew were out there, or maybe a few more than that, but there were no, standout deals other than this one that seemed to be the right fit at the time, and it ended up working out.
So then, as you were trying to figure out what you were going to do, and then you decided, okay, I think I want to do the acquisition side, how did you find potential sellers?
Well, as in anything in this market, you network and you kind of figure out what's going on in each region or each state and who's selling. I think there were 4 or 5 that I think that there was 1 or 2 that had been hanging out there for years for sale. None of which were priced right or something wasn't right on those deals. This particular one was the seller was retiring, and he wanted to keep the business going for his employees. He had attachment to his loyalty to his longtime employees. So the setup for an acquisition was real good, and the market. I like the market, so a lot of things a lot of boxes checked correctly for me on this one.
Okay.
From the outset.
So the age was right for the seller to where he didn't really have a succession plan, and you could
Correct.
be that succession plan. You were looking at the market, and that seemed to check the box. What about the size of the dealership and any of the portfolio or performance metrics?
Well, yeah, the size was right for me. This particular size, it wasn't too small, or too big. Really, it's a pretty good size, right? Kind of in the wheelhouse for what I was looking at in the acquisition side. And in terms of the metrics, we could, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the DMS they were using was real old, and so the information we got was not the best. And we could see what was going on with the portfolio, basically, but it was hard to get deeper than that. And so there was a bit of a leap of faith for me, and I think you really at the time as well, to jump in. And but therein lies the value also. We I feel like we got the deal at a pretty good discount, really, overall. I mean, if the guy had really had his account, everything really tight, he probably could have sold it for a lot more money. And I sort of sensed that. I could see that sort of on the internals there, and that seemed to work out. So.
And so just so as a reminder to everybody, what was the size of the dealership in terms of the accounts, maybe receivables-ish, if you're comfortable sharing any of that?
Yeah, it was about 1,500 accounts, and I want to say it was around principal and interest about 14 million principal and interest on the overall portfolio.
Okay.
Of which about 2.5 million were worthless. other than the cars, which we've been we're still getting back.
Yeah. Okay, so average ACVs were?
Oh, $4 grand, pretty low. It's an old school buyer payer dealership, low ACV type thing. So,
yeah. And the DMS you were saying, as I remember, it was more or less customized. Do you, just for the sake of joy, do you remember the name?
Well, is it joy or is it pain?
Well, it's comical to me.
Cybernetics.
Cybernetics, custom DMS named Cybernetics.
Which I thought was a Schwarzenegger term or something.
Exactly.
But
it's too good. Okay. And then as you were getting closer, and how was the negotiation process? Because you recognized that there was value there if the portfolio actually could perform. But how did you come to that agreement with the seller?
Well, we were far enough apart to where we couldn't do the whole. We had a period of negotiation there, and it was overall a short window. But we had a period where I didn't know if it was going to go through because I said I'm paying you 50 cents, and that's it. That's what I thought I could do, and he was stuck on 60. And so at the end there, I said, "Well, we'll do 50, and I'll do a note," and it worked out that way. It was he was sort of stuck. He's an older gentleman and was sort of stuck on his number, but that's how we worked it out. So.
Okay. And in terms of what actually came with the purchase, list out everything that came with it. Not in full detail, but like locations, the actual brand name, employees, the portfolio.
3 locations in Tampa. Bond Auto Sales. The guy had been in business since 1962, and I'm at the location now where he started in '62, and it looks like he started in 1962. And then the staff, 34 employees, I think, when we took over. It's mostly Latina staff and business. And one of the other things that I was happy about, one of the critical bets we made was whether or not we were going to be able to retain the staff. That was, sort of an unknown. I didn't have a lot of time at all with them, really any time with them, and because he didn't, want to do that ahead of the closing. And so that was a risk we sort of bet on. It worked out. That was one of the things that worked out for us. So.
Yeah, well, good. You just brought up 2 things I want to touch on. The due diligence process, which in larger transactions like this can be very lengthy, but in this scenario, what was that like?
Well, it was pretty short in that he had like 4 or 5 things he wanted. He wanted to close by a certain date. I, had let him know that I was, now, open to looking at stuff, and so it was a very compressed due diligence period. So we had to negotiate the pricing and the terms and the contract, and then the analytics, which you guys were LHPH Capital, as most of y'all know, they're really the leaders in leasing in our industry in the country, and so your expertise on the analytics that matter, that really matter, that was a big deal for this, and me being both of us, I think, having all that behind us and understanding what the numbers look like from what we had was a real important piece of all this. So.
Yeah, and while you're saying that, let me give a shout out to Kelly McKinney here, because she was able to look at things in a different lens than I was.
Just amazing. And we talked
Way to go, Kelly.
And last night I was telling her 3 or 4 times where I thought it wouldn't close, and I was panicked, and I was calling her, and she was like, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." And I was like, so, yeah, absolutely. She was awesome, awesome.
Okay, and so there's really 2 phases of this. There's the I'm searching for the right acquisition, going through that process, and then getting to closing. What was that final week where? What was that like?
Yeah, well, yeah, no, it was wild because we had all these major things with the DMV and licensing and all this stuff that had to happen. We were fast tracking everything, and things had to hit exactly right, and they didn't, or they may have been a day or 2 late. So, yeah, it was wild. Like I said, I didn't think it was going to close 3 or 4 times in the last 4 days, probably, and so it was wild. This is not the way to do acquisitions. We can talk about, that's what I know now is, so in certain aspects of it anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the first phase. The second phase is, again, the acquisition occurred, and you walk in the door as the new owner. Tell us about that.
Well, the staff was always good, even from the jump. I mean, it was a rough few weeks. I didn't really know what I had at all with the staff and what they were doing, how everything worked really, and I found out it was rougher than I thought it was going in, according to what the seller was saying it looked like. So I was trying to feel the staff out. They were trying to, feel me out, trying to understand what, was going on with everything. It was a big shock to them because a lot of them had been with the guy for 20 years. So that was a very rough, not a lot of sleep that first month, so it was kind of a...
And simultaneously, you came in with a new business model that you wanted to introduce.
Right. I didn't get into that the first month. But I did pretty soon after that when I explained to them, I guess probably the second month, in that second, third month, we started getting into what we were doing, the vision. I told them we were going to make some changes all for the better. They realized that the previous owner had kind of let it go in the last few years, and so they were skeptical, but they were also giving me a chance to prove up, what we wanted to do and the value, and perhaps, get back to a growth mode and better. And it's worked out that way so far. It's been good.
So what was it like for the staff once you put into the plan in place? Hey, here's what I want to do, and I want you to get on board with that.
Well, they were excited. I made it, and one of the opportunities that I saw right out of the gate, actually before the acquisition, was the pay scale that most of the staff was on was below or significantly below what we all understand pay should be for most everybody, except for the salesman maybe. but so I had an opportunity there to go in and give some bonuses pretty quickly to the folks, or raises, and then bonus programs and packages, real compensation packages they hadn't seen ever really at the company. They'd been with the guy so long, they just kind of, and a lot of them hadn't had raises in 5 years, and so that was an opportunity that I was able to take advantage of.
Okay. So. And then, in terms of the staff, I think if I was going to be in this situation, I'd be worried, well, the staff is just going to get up and leave, and I'm going to be doing this all on my own,
right.
And then I'm going to have to find new people. What happened in that transition? You said not everybody received this well. Did you keep everybody on board? Did you do the Jim Collins approach of getting the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus?
Somewhat. There were the structure was there were 3 stores in Tampa that I took over. 2 were about 1.5 miles apart, and the 2 smaller stores had managers, both pretty highly paid managers, and the volume wasn't that great, and they really weren't doing that much. I could see right out the bat. I offered them sales jobs because they both had sales experience, but I ended up letting those two guys go, and another senior manager at the main lot who ended up not being for various reasons, viable for the long term. And so there was some of that, and those were significant situations there for the, well, it had to happen, but the staff reckoned, and actually the staff was happy about at least one of them, right? So they wanted that, see that happen, found out after, and so that worked out. But so, yeah, so most everybody that, in my view, that needed to be on the bus stayed on the bus, and we've added a couple folks here lately and so forth, so yeah.
Okay. And then after introducing the new business model, how was that adoption by the staff? You were going from buy here, pay here to lease here, pay here, and I think that's a common curiosity is, oh, if I was a buy here, pay here dealer and going to convert, that I might lose all my staff. What was that like to make the business change?
Well, it wasn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be, because I explained to them the value, that we were bringing with the LHPH model, and there were some resistance at first, but most everybody embraced it and realized, what the differences would look like over time, and so it really wasn't all that hard. A lot of similarities. We're also doing, simultaneous to all this, we're doing a DMS conversion from cybernetics to DealPack, and so just a lot of heavy lifting there in the first 6-8 months for sure.
Yeah,
6-7
absolutely.
months, yeah.
Okay, what was something that surprised you the most throughout this process?
Well, I guess how bad the DMS and the processes were. That there's no reporting, no inventory management at all. I discovered they had a repo lot 20 miles outside of town that had like 120 cars. Half of them had been sitting there for six months, just sitting there. I just stuff like that. I just didn't realize it was scary, really. But just how bad things were in general, systems, processes, and so forth. So.
Okay. And then what was something that surprised you the least?
Well, I guess as I mentioned a minute ago, the retaining the key staff members were important. I bet on them understanding what we were doing with the model and me, them getting along with me and so forth, and that was a big bet. And to your point a minute, I mean, it could have gone. They could have just walked out. They could have gone to other dealerships, and I would have been in bad shape. That would have been real bad. But I made a big bet on that, and that worked out. So I guess that, I was kind of counting on that. So that's probably least surprising.
Well, and I'm sure you're not giving yourself enough credit for it, because any time that you're taking over, jumping into an organization like that, there is the potential for that, but
Yeah.
a good leader can embrace the staff and walk through that. And it sounds like you took a sort of a no-change orientation for the first month to settle things in, and then did it in bite-sized pieces. Is that right?
Pretty much, yep. And just explaining that everybody's going to benefit, do better, have a chance to improve their own skill set, grow with the company, with me together, and that sort of thing work. So.
Okay. All right. My last question before we maybe open it up to anyone else is, it sounds like you had a lot of sleepless nights early on. How are you sleeping now?
Better, but there's still, I know Rick and Bill are CarMart guys, and your model and the institutional groups, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's when you open a new store somewhere, isn't it like a year and a half until you project being stabilized? And you have the model, have the whole, team and so forth, and so I get asked that question a good bit. I'm still probably, 4 or 5 months maybe from getting stabilized, I think, at this point. And I need, various things involved in that, but better, sleeping better overall, for sure.
Nice.
So.
Well, are you okay if we open it up to some questions that might be around Rick? Yeah. I tell you what, there are some times that I was thinking not, maybe, I was questioning in January, February, when I first got in there, whatever,
it was pretty rough. But I would do it again, and it's better if you. What I didn't have was I didn't have a team. I didn't have a DMS going at any other location I could snap into. So it wasn't. It was you want to plug and play either, being a conversion to your own platform that you have in your own team, or something close to that. And this was just me, and then I was real fortunate to be able to bring Wendy Smith on in the first few weeks, 4 or 5 weeks in, which she was big on helping it get stabilized and so forth. And Mr. Elizondo has been a big help as well. So, and of course the LHPH team has been huge. And I would also add that I had, I know most of the financing options in the market out there for this sort of thing, and financing in general for buyer payer deals. And with my background with leases and their expertise is one thing that make them an obvious choice for me and for this relationship, but also the dealer-friendly approach that you all take at LHPH Capital, and it's much more like a partnership than it is a typical lender-operator relationship, and that's a big deal. That's a real big deal for me. So.
I didn't ask him to say any of that. I promise.
No, well, I think those of you that were also dealer clients would agree with me on that.
Corey.
Well, we did a note. We did a note. There was gray sky. No blue sky. We did a note though. We did a note. Yeah. So. I didn't tie it to performance because he was pretty much out of it, and I thought at one point I might need to try to do that and keep him involved, but then I realized that wouldn't have helped anything. So we just did a note, and if in fact I did it all, the whole staff walked out the first week, we'd have been collected. I don't know what we'd have done. So.
Jim.
Yeah. Yeah, this particular one had no debt on the portfolio. Yeah. So, and the percentage, the pricing we paid was on the qualified receivables, which would have been 0 to 29, I believe, or 30. So, yeah, no debt on this particular portfolio.
Yeah, and just to answer that from our perspective is we wouldn't shy away from being able to refinance if there was debt. It would just have to not be over advanced with the borrowing base, and have to be simple to where 100%.
We were focused on the portfolio at that particular point, although I will also, Chad Martin and J.P. Bryan were big on the forecasting and the pro formas, and they were able to put some things together in a real short period of time late last year. Great job, guys, for all your help with that too. So on that side of things, initially we.
Yeah, and that helped us get more comfortable too, because we know JP and Chad and Bill. Actually, would you take a second and talk about what Bill did for you, or is doing for you right now?
He's morphed from a collections consultant to more of an overall dealership consultant. He's had experience all across the dealership platform, so he's been huge, been real big for us. The staff, any of you that know Bill, wouldn't be surprised when you hear that the staff took to him real quickly, and so yeah, we've got a framed picture already of Bill on the wall and it's got think what would Bill do? And so he's been big. Thank you, Bill, for everything, really.
That's good. Mark.
Yeah, well, I did kind of stumble upon it, kind of a serendipitous situation. He had been around a long time. I think he'd been very successful over all these years, and so he had no debt on anything really. He owned the properties outright. He, real low cost. He just did it. He was doing it to. It was one of these situations where um, he's in his 80s now, and he did it to stay alive, really, to keep busy doing something. And so, whether or not it would go under or not, I don't know. They had assets, obviously. They had the portfolio and real estate and so forth. So it wasn't a leverage situation which would have taken him under. And I think he had a lot of, probably had some pretty good statement, outside the. So in this particular case, he was just kind of just staying busy, just to keep working and keep moving.
And I'll add in. Yeah, and I think that was probably the longer term unwinding of it, is that it would deteriorate over time. And as he was less involved, at least what I noticed was, and I hope it's okay if I share this, but there just wasn't accountability in the staff, and nobody really knew what they were doing at certain points, at least my observation. And so I think without getting a strong leader in, I mean, Ed's really saving Bond Auto, which is awesome. All right, who else? Murray.
Well, going from a dealership where we had built over the years up to where it was more of a corporate level, institutional level dealership with reporting and good managers in each department reporting and great communication with everybody, and everybody kind of knows what we're supposed to be doing day to day. Going from that to the trenches like this, you want to put structure in as soon as possible, but you also don't want to scare the staff away. So there's a balance there, and there's a timeline you've got to try to manage to kind of implement the changes. But you want job descriptions. You want an overall handbook. Make sure you have a handbook with policies and procedures and all that. And I'm still working on that. And so there's some just basic fundamental stuff you want to make sure you put in so you're clear with everybody, and that everybody understands there are no bad ideas, but and accountability is big, obviously, in our business. So the basic things really, and given the fact that I am new, or a prospective new leader would be new, you want to make sure those fundamental things are in place and everybody understands clearly what their roles are and what the communication is supposed to look like, reporting, managers' meetings, all those things. So.
Thanks, Ed. Corey.
Well, they've got to. No, I wouldn't rebrand it in that market because they've got such good name recognition over such a long period of time. But getting into other markets would maybe around the corner, possibly. I'm not sure if I would keep the name or not. But they've got a pretty good name in the market for buy here, pay here. Deal pack. Nightmare. Yeah, nightmare. And we're still got some issues. We're not we're down to just a few, but that was a rough conversion. Sure was.
I have this great picture of cybernetics on the wall in the office, which was like an old switchboard. It's like everything is plugged in and exposed in numbers, and I, I, I mean, bless your heart for how you were able to get all that stuff into DealPack.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, no, they actually had CSV files, and it was enough to get. Well, it's so. It was some manual, but so it wasn't a clean conversion. We would convert sheets over, and for example, on the accounts, about 1,000 accounts, excuse me, 1,200 accounts converted over pretty cleanly, but another 300 or so didn't capture their last payments for the last month or something. So they were not. It was not accurate for those accounts. So we're having to use both, trying to figure. The team's having to figure out what's going on with those accounts from both systems for 6 weeks at least. So, just those sort of things. Not very clean overall. When they're showing delinquent, when they're not, and we had a couple repo mistakes as a result as well. So, yeah. Well, where Arnold left off, we're taking over. So.
Yeah, so good. Hang on, Kevin. Trig.
Yeah, well, I would differ from your premise that we'd be at the same level now of accounts. You've got we're 1,400 or so right now, and just a few months in here, there was, that wouldn't. So it's a scale thing, and what you're hoping to get is a good enough team and a good enough cash flow overall to get somewhat stabilized to then be able to look around and potentially grow, and improve the business, grow organically in the same stores, but then also potentially expand. So I wouldn't be able to. A startup actually would, unless if you're somehow found a high volume startup somewhere, then it'd take you a couple of years at least to get up anywhere near on this scale. Certainly one store, it really wouldn't, maybe longer than that. So.
Good question, though, Trig.
Yeah. Well, and the other, and one of the other not so surprising aspects in a positive way was we could see the collections side wasn't run very well, and Bill came in so I thought going in, and I remember talking to you about this initially also, that I'm pretty confident we can improve collections immediately basically. So it went from when I took over 48% current most weeks to over 80 now. We're over 80 in the current, and that cash flow wise, so we're collecting way over the level we paid for the portfolio. If you can understand, JP can articulate better than I can. But yeah, so that cash flow wise, that
Yeah.
Yeah, just a couple months ago, 3 months ago, yeah. Well, it's been more learning the new deal pack collection system for the collectors has been the big thing. A couple of them were a little bit, asking me about leases and the differences and so forth. And I said, we had a training manual and we laid it all out for them. But the new DMS was a bigger ramp up for them. But they're real happy with it now. You see the benefit and the value of all the different functions that they didn't have in the past. That's true. There is some nuanced stuff like that may not be. We started a warranty. Didn't have a warranty in the past, so that's the only real add-on we've got so far. And then the various lease aspects of the lease versus. But so far so good. I mean, a couple little bumps, but no, with Bill at the helm there, it's helping out. That's right.
Good question, Trig. And then last one with Kevin.
Well, there are no pros, and so I closed a smaller one down 3 or 4 months ago. I asked the seller had it in place, I guess years ago, that it's a different sub-market. This is Auto Mall Parkway basically in Tampa, and so the second store is in a different sort of pocket, but it's too close, and I closed it down. The seller had that been both going for 20 years, the same, So the only from a more top-down look at that, if you were blowing out numbers and needed space for inventory and sales, and that you needed more space, that could be a reason. But there's no real good reason, at this point, for me anyway.
All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much.
Thank you,
This was
Tim.
great.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.